Whoa, this guy is sick. I mean, welcome. My name is Enrique Cardona, and welcome to another review show in which I talk about once again about Daredevil Born Again, and in this case, episode 7, Art for Art's Sake. And boy, that Muse is totally a psychopath, and I don't know how to spin it in any other direction because holy crap, this guy was intense. Even though this is his last episode, whoa. So, once again, for those who want to know my thoughts on the other episodes from the previous ones, please go check out all my episodes talking about Daredevil Born Again, my thoughts, and what I think they're going to do in the last episode. One thing that I need to warn you is that we're almost to the end of Daredevil Born Again, or at the very least, season 1. Because after this, we are going to jump next year with season 2, and a lot of things will happen. And I have a very vivid idea of what is going to happen in the next episodes because I have some thoughts. But let's talk about the episode itself and what happened afterwards. So, in the previous episode, we see that Matt comes back as Daredevil and stops Muse from killing Angela Ayala, who was the niece of Hector Ayala. So, we know now that Muse is behind the killings as well as the paintings made in human blood, which is sick. And we're going to see a lot more about Muse and his backstory in this episode. But needless to say, Matt comes back. He has a little bit of sexy time with Heather Glenn. I mean, seriously, Matt Murdock can be with any woman and somehow, despite all of his issues, can score with a therapist. That's saying a lot. But yeah, Heather is still worried about Matt because it's obvious that he's keeping the secrets of being Daredevil. She doesn't know why she's keeping a secret from her. She wants to know what's going on, and Matt tries to persuade it again. But we all know that it's going to boil over eventually. And this episode was going to show us what happens when the two lives collide with each other. Because not only that, we see that with Matt's activities, Cherry is very, very upset because he doesn't want Matt to once again go back to his old promise of not being Daredevil, or at the very least, he wants him to stop being Daredevil, considering the consequences of, Foggy, his actions, almost killing Bullseye, and what it meant to him. And we all know that in the last episode, Matt was willing to kill Muse, although he was stopped at the last moment by realizing that Angela was dying. So that's a good thing. But yeah, Matt was at the breaking point and he doesn't want to stop being Daredevil, or at the very least doesn't want to stop until he stops Muse. But things get a little bit worse for him because it's clearly obvious that Kingpin finds out, and all thanks to, with Blake's help as well as Buck Cashman, which is his second in command. We see that Wilson hired Buck Cashman as his security officer, as his consultant, but we all know that he has a dark history because the Kingpin alludes it to. I mean, Wilson alludes to the fact that, well, Buck Cashman, his right hand, is basically also having a checkers pass. In fact, Wilson is mentioning about his 10-year crime empire that he built during season 1. We all know with Leland Oswald, Manangao, the Russian Bratva, alliances with Nobu and the Yakuza. You remember, if you saw season 1, you know that he had a crime organization in which he was using in order to control the city in an effort to save it. But we all know that didn't end up well, and well, it cost him his entire empire and Wesley. So yeah, it's something that Kingpin still holds a very huge grudge towards Matt. But yeah, so As the police starts to discover all the bodies that Muse left in his lair trying to create human blood, we see that a little piece of cloth, or at the very least a patch with blood in it, is discovered by Detective Quinn. So one of the things that we don't know is what kind of blood are they going to show? One of the victims or the killer itself? And that's what we transpired to this episode. As Matt tries to get answers from Angela, we see that Vanessa is talking to Luca, one of the gang members from Vanessa's crime organization. So, as they talk, it seems that Luca is trying to influence Vanessa into killing Wilson Fisk because they consider his major activities as a major obstacle for crime itself, because that's something that they didn't agree on. Because, let's be honest, despite the best intentions that Wilson has in order to fix the city, it's clear that it's damaging his other life, which was the criminal life, the one that Vanessa took over, and I feel like she wants Wilson to go back to. And it's going to complicate things because, like Lucas said, they want to get rid of Wilson Fisk, and they want to do so there is no loose ends. But now let's talk about the episode in which the character we see is based on, and that is Muse, or should I say, Bastian Cooper. As we see Bastian in his therapy sessions with Heather Glenn, we also see that Detective Kim, talking to Wilson Fisk, they discover who Muse is, which is this kid Bastian. As we see the expositions, we see that not only Bastian was a troubled kid with a lot of parental issues, given the fact that probably his parents were not the best supporters, and Bastian wanted to be an artist all his life, but didn't know how, and the parents forced him to go to Taekwondo in order to learn more martial arts and learn how to fight. And judging by how they tell these stories and given his criminal records, it seems that this kid suffered a lot of mental issues that force him to reckon to what he is and who he is. Basically, judging by what it says, he had a falling out with his parents, or the parents were abusive, wanting him to not to stop being an artist and actually be probably a fighter or someone else. I don't know. He had a teacher that he resented a lot, and he ended up killing because, as the Kim says, he appeared dead a few weeks or months, if I'm not mistaken, when he disappeared, and he was found dead somewhere. And it's clear that for Bastian, despite hating him, he learned a lot from this guy. In terms of fighting, of course, and probably how to be more agile into killing people. Not that the teacher probably taught him that, but it's clear that he was so roughed on him that he lost everything and he lost his mind. And Bastian wanted all his life to be an artist, a painter. And probably judging by his past and judging by the circumstances that led to him becoming Muse, it's pretty clear that he didn't like people and use his art to speak his mind, probably praising superheroes or condemning other people in power like Kingpin. But yeah, it all connects with Heather Glenn, because for Bastian, reading the books of Heather Glenn make him think that she understands him, that Heather understands Bastian in a sick way. I don't know how. It's hard to understand the mind of a psychopath like Muse. But yeah, it's definitely showing that he's willing to kill people through his art. That is death for art's sake, or as the episode says, art for art's sake. But yeah, it ends up with him knocking down Heather. Heather doesn't know what to do. She's trapped with Muse. And as soon as they find out, we see Matt investigating and realizing through one of the paintings of Muse that he's going after Heather. But of course, he gets discovered. Remember the detective that we saw in the first episodes of this season, Detective Powell, the guy who has a Punisher skull tattoo on his wrist, and he has a few friends in the police force that were joining in to become this task force anti-vigilante force, something like that. Do you remember him? Well, he discovers that Daredevil is investigating the case, but thankfully Daredevil knocks him out. So things are getting slowed down for the anti-hero task force. So basically, Matt goes after her as Daredevil. He enters the room where Muse is ready to kill Heather for his art, and they get into a fight. Muse is trying to get to kill Heather, putting on his canvas. By the way, interesting fact about Muse's costume. The stitches that you see are not bandages, but actually canvas pieces. He actually ripped some canvases from the original form and put it on his costume in order to become, well, Muse, in order to make his Muse costume. That is sick. But it's not far-fetched from a psychopath like that. So, yeah. It definitely shows how sick a man like that can be and how willing to go to extremes he's willing to go in order to get to his piece of art. But yeah, in getting to a brutal fight, Matt tries to stop him. They all bleed until Heather, using a gun, kills Muse. Now, I gotta say, for his final appearance in this episode, the actor who plays Muse in this episode, Hunter Dohan, really knocked it out of the park by portraying this sick, twisted, and very damaged person. Now, I don't know if people will like the origin of Muse, because in the comics he doesn't have an identity. Although I should also mention that I don't know if I mentioned it in past episodes, but Muse used inhuman blood in order to make his spray paintings towards New York, and in this episode it's clear that he's using more human blood rather than any inhuman or mutant blood. So that is still sick, but not far-fetched from the character. I don't know what you guys thought about Muse in his final appearance. It was supposed to be him being the final boss, the final villain in this season, in the original run. But as the plans changed, they decided to get rid of Muse in this episode very quickly because, well, they want to push the idea that Daredevil is going to have a major villainous factor going up against him that is going to probably ruin his reputation. Speaking of reputation, we see that Kirsten and Cherry are discussing with each other or arguing with each other about Matt, his secrets, why she's out of the loop, why does Cherry feel alienated from what Matt is doing, but he cannot tell to Kristen because they don't want her to be put in danger. Yeah, so things are getting complicated, and it's clear that the more time passes and Matt is trying to be Daredevil, the more of his life, his normal life, he starts to, crumbling a little bit. But in the end, the police finds Muse dead and Heather injured. Wilson spins the narrative around the anti-vigilante task force being the ones responsible for the stopping Muse, which we all know that's not true, but because Wilson discovers that Daredevil stopped Muse, or at the very least he was the one responsible. I don't think he thinks that Daredevil killed Muse, because that is not in his nature, and it was actually Heather who kill Muse, but he knows that if he says that to the public, it will probably be the end of his campaign, his rule as campaign as mayor. It will be spelling disaster for him and for his entire office. So he has to play the narrative that Muse was the one who got killed by the anti-vigilante task force, and Powell is happily blind to that idea. Speaking of which, we see that Daniel Blake is talking to Bibi Urich and basically scorching her for leaking the news about the dam, the garbage, and the ideas of Wilson Fisk, and threatening her to basically keep her mouth shut and to be more on the side of Kingpin, on the side of Wilson Fisk, before she might wind up having some horrible thing happen to her. Basically, Daniel is becoming Richard Fisk the more time we see. And it's honestly, it's clearly obvious that Daniel wants to be in the good side of Kingpin, on the good side of Wilson Fisk. So as Matt is tending to Heather at the hospital, clearly Heather is showing a lot of trauma, a lot of terrible trauma for having to kill a person in using a gun. Even if it was in self-defense, it's clear that she's traumatized by it. She does know that Daredevil was there and remembers that he said her name, implying that maybe one day she'll discover that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. But as the Muse went going around and we see that things are escalating, we see that Vanessa is sending a text to Luca that Wilson is in a restaurant all alone eating, and he's there to finish the job. Basically, Luca wants to execute Kingpin in mob style well, until Luca is eliminated by Buck Cashman. So yeah, this guy is not just a prick or a snobby little second in command, basically the analog of Wesley, but he's definitely showing that he has a checkers past and is clearly showing that he was an assassin by the way he killed Luca in this episode. And Kingpin was expecting that and basically knows that Vanessa sent Luca to kill him somehow. It's clear that things are getting worse for the couple, and who knows what's going to happen. Speaking of which, the fact that Buck Cashman is an assassin, it makes me think that they're going to try to base his character alongside his comic book counterpart, which was Bullet, one of the aliases that Buck was wearing back in his crime organization, or at the very least on one of his old lives. And judging by the way he acted, it clearly shows that he is probably a stone cold killer, more so than just being an office person. But yeah, the more we see, things are getting worse and worse. Maybe not for Matt and Wilson, but it's showing that their lives are basically changing, and probably they're going back to what they used to do in the past. Now, the question remains, with Muse dead and the fact that we see that the anti-vigilante task force is getting bigger and bigger, the question is, what is going to happen in the two final episodes? Because you would think that things are not going to get better. Well, I have a few theories. Now, we don't see Matt and Heather in a ballroom or Kingpin and Vanessa dancing, because that's supposed to be one of the scenes from a few final episodes. And I have to believe that in one of those, Bullseye is going to appear and is going to spell disaster for Matt and Wilson, because keep in mind that what Benjamin Poindexter was alive by the first episodes, and he was put in prison. But we don't see him, or we don't know what happened to him ever since he went to jail. And judging by the promos, it's clear that he is going to escape and going after, I don't know, Daredevil or Wilson. I like to think the latter because keep in mind, Wilson killed Julie Barnes. If you don't know who that Julie Barnes is, she's the woman that Benjamin Poindexter was stalking in the third season of Daredevil. And Wilson killed her in order to manipulate Benjamin Poindexter into being his right hand and to be his personal assassin and to frame Daredevil from murders. But in the end, Benjamin Poindexter discovered that Wilson was the man responsible for Julie's death because of Matt. And now he's probably gonna get out in order to kill Vanessa. Maybe as payback to Wilson. Maybe. Now we don't know why he killed Foggy. That's one of the questions that we all have. If this guy had a very, very huge vendetta against Wilson for killing Julie, then why did he went after Foggy Nelson and kill him? That's something that a lot of people don't know, and that's something that I'm very curious about, because if he's going to appear in the last two episodes, or at the very least tease for the second season, we have to know his motivations. And we don't know if Karen is going to appear. We know that Punisher is going to appear. So yeah, these final episodes are going to be insane. So we're gonna have to wait and see. But overall, not a bad episode. It was very good. It was a good final moment for Muse as a killer. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. We don't know what's gonna happen in the finale. But leave your comments in the section below talking about what you think is going to happen, how the final episodes will be. And yeah, I hope to see the next one. So whatever happens is in episodes 8 and 9 is going to be huge. So I'm been Enrique, and I'll see you next time. Peace.